Hey everybody, how's it going? So in the previous video we spoke about HTML and CSS and the issues we have with components or building components using CSS and having people write generic HTML to try and represent a component, and how people who are authoring the document can overwrite the CSS of an author of a component, and basically how that's just never going to work as it stands today. Then I spoke at the end of the video about this concept of a shadow DOM. Now, you can see right in front of you right now, I have an article about this, or an article I should say, talking about the shadow DOM and how it works. Okay, now, basically this article explains about the problem I just mentioned in the previous video, and then it talks about the shadow DOM and how it works in terms of isolating CSS for your components. Okay. So basically, it's explaining everything I'm about to talk about in this video. Okay, I'll leave a link for this in the description if you care to read it. I just want to quickly show you that. Now, I've gone back to the original problem that we had at the start of the first video, in the sense of we have a paragraph and a content author trying to style all paragraphs, and you can see here that the person in component 1 is had it marked in red and component 2 is marked in red. But obviously we want to make these green and blue. Okay, so how do we go about this using this concept of a shadow DOM? Well, firstly, before I go into how to implement the shadow DOM, I probably should explain what it is. Basically what a shadow DOM is it's an individual DOM outside of the DOM tree that you normally know, right? So it's like having multiple DOM trees within your web document. The difference is that you can specify what element represents the root, or the host, I should say, of this new DOM that you're going to create, this shadow DOM, right? So in the case of this video, we're going to create two shadow DOMs. One that represents a DOM tree for the component 1, and one that represents a DOM tree for component 2. So therefore, two shadow DOMs, one root DOM. Okay. Content authors will always write their CSS that will pertain to anything inside of the root DOM, but as you will see when I show you in a moment, it will not affect anything inside of a shadow DOM. Okay. So let's get started. It's better to see it with an example. So back over in the code, and just to give you context of what I've got here, we've got the original markup we had at the start of the previous video. So we've gone back to having two divs wrapped around a paragraph to represent a component, and we have a global paragraph. Now, I also mentioned I wanted to have someone just be able to use the p tag to style all their paragraphs using putting it in red, right? But we wanted this paragraph for this component 1 to be background green and this one to be background blue. So how do we do that? Well, we need to create these shadow DOMs, right? Now to do that, we use JavaScript, okay? We can't do this using any kind of markup. You have to use JavaScript to do this. So I'm going to open up a script tag at the bottom here. And now I've got the script tag open. I want to be able to target this div element and mark it as component 1. So for the simplicity of this example, I'm just going to give this an ID of component 1. Right? The other thing you need to do when you're building a shadow DOM is you need to specify all children of what is hosting it in code. Right? You can't declare it here, because if you declare it here, it'll be taken over by the stylings of the document author. So we still need this, and therefore I'm going to comment it out for the moment. But instead of declaring it in our markup, I'm going to declare it in code. So we're going to add it dynamically, essentially. Now this one I'm going to also give an ID of component 2. And I'll quickly demonstrate how we can create this content here inside of the component. Now the normal way that people would know how to do it is to do something like const component 1 equals document.getElementById, component 1, right? And we can do the same for component 2. So it changes to 2, component 2. And then if we want to put the paragraphs inside of it, we go const para, para, component 1 paragraph, component 1 para equals document.createElement. If you don't know any of this, this is just simple JavaScript stuff. Const component 2 para equals document.createElement. Another paragraph. Alright, and then simply we just go component 1 dot append child, component 1 para, and component 2 dot append child, component para, 2 para. Now I'm just going to quickly run this code and see what happens in the browser. Okay, nothing happened in the browser at the moment, so I'm just going to quickly go back and see what I did wrong here. Okay, I see what I did wrong here. I didn't actually specify the text for any of these. So if I go component para 1 or 1 para, I need to set the inner text, or we'll even go inner HTML to this here. That's all I forgot. I just forgot to add the text. Makes sense. And then for component 2, we need to add this text. Now hopefully this will work. Let's go check it out. And now you can see we still have the 2 components, but you can see it's still being overridden with the background of what was set by the document author. Now we don't want this. But at this point, we haven't actually created a shadow DOM. All we've done is moved the creation of the paragraph from being declarative by writing it in the markup to programmatically adding it. So we haven't gained any extra value here. So what we need to do now is create a shadow DOM, right? So let's go about doing that. So how do we create a shadow DOM? Well, essentially, there's a special method that is part of the element that you use. So let's go component 1 root, a shadow root. I'll explain what a shadow root is in a minute. Equals component 1 dot attach shadow, and then you have to use this concept of open. Mode equals open. Now I'm not going to explain what mode equals open does in this video, but just understand you're going to have it there for the moment. So what this has actually done now is this creates a root node inside of this new shadow DOM that we've created. Now the host of the shadow DOM is component 1 because we've attached the shadow to it, right? So the host is component 1. The root is this new element. Now, because we've done that, we now need to apply the children to that root, okay? So I'm going to save that, and then I'm going to quickly do the same for component 2. So component 2, and component 2 down here. And now if we save, what's going to happen now in the DOM? Let's take a look. Well, as you can see now, the styles written by the document author are no longer applied to both those components. Why? Because the CSS written by the document author is applied to the main DOM and is not transferable into these shadow DOMs. So therefore, this is like a separate tree. It knows nothing about the styles declared by the main tree. Okay? So this allows us now to create styling inside of each of these individual shadow DOMs, so that it will only ever stay inside of this DOM and won't affect anything outside of it, nor will anything outside of it affect anything in it. Okay, so how do we add styles to these shadow DOMs? Let's take a look. So to add a style, it's really not that tricky. Basically, we just have to create a style element. So where we've created a P element here, we just come down, we go const component one style equals document.create element style, right? And we'll do the same for component 2. And then obviously we have to include them. So I'm going to include it before the, obviously we're going to include it before the paragraph that gets added. So this one will have component 1 style, and then this one will be component 2 style. Now obviously this is not enough yet because we haven't written the CSS to make this work. Before I do that, I'm going to come back up here and I'm going to make this a little bit easier to look at. Oops. Like so. So before we had a background of green and a font size of 4 for component 1. So let's go about writing that. So that's pretty straightforward. We just come down and we'll go component 1 style dot and be inner text, I believe. Just trying to remember. Yep, I think. Yep, equals, and I use the little tilde option here so I can go over multiple lines. So I'm going to go background #0f0, so that's green, and we're going to go font size of 4rem, right? And then what else? So we're going to do the same for component 2, right? And we're going to make this one blue, and we said this one was going to be 3rem. Now that I've saved that, let's take a look and see what happens. And I've got myself an error here, so I'm just going to quickly go back and see what I did wrong. Well, the first issue I have here is I've got component 2 para there and component 2 style should go here. Let's just quickly see what that does. CSS is still not being applied here. Interesting. Go back and take one more look. Okay, I see the problem. The problem is I forgot to add the selector in here. So we're looking for paragraphs, right? Yes, silly me. So we're looking for paragraph selectors. I've just kind of thrown the properties in without the selector. Makes sense? Oops. So you're not perfect, people. I'm not going to edit out my errors. Never will. Nobody's perfect. So save. Now let's go and take a look. Now you can see it. So now you can see that you got the styling for component 1 and the styling for component 2. Now this looks exactly as the same as we saw in the first video. So how about we try, like we did in the first video, the same CSS selector we had at the top and also wrapping those divs. Will that affect this here and this here? Alright, let's take a look. So coming back up to what we have here, we're going to once again add those 2 divs like we did in the first video. So 2 divs, right? We're going to put this stuff inside of it. Save. And we'll tab over. And so this one's going to have a class of row. And this one, class of container. And then we're going to modify up here to get a better specificity. Container dot row. So this still has a specificity of 21. Alright. And if you look down here, we're just using a P element. Alright. So this is a specificity of 1. right? So this should definitely be overruled, right? Well, let's see what it does. And as you can see, no change. So that is a good thing. We've now been able to isolate the CSS that we write inside of this shadow DOM, and any global CSS rule, rule that's part of the normal DOM, cannot get into those shadow DOMs. So it can be as specific as it wants, and it will never change the styling design for the components. So that's it. That's the basics on shadow DOM. Obviously, there's a lot more involved. In the next video, what I want to do is talk about web components. So we're not still in the Angular area yet, but web components is also a new feature coming by the W3C that has the same concept of an Angular component. So you can see where I want to derive the distinction of where Angular was going when they created their components. Then we'll look into Angular, how Angular deals with styling. Okay, so I'll see you all in the next video.